I was quite impressed with the video quality of the original Mavic Mini, due in part to adoption of a new generation video processor. So I'm quite excited to test the video capability of the last DJI release, the Mini 2, which had extremely important features like 4K video, a much increased bitrate, and a digital zoom. In this video I will show how the Mini 2 performs in video quality in all sorts of different light situations, and I will test all the new functionalities. I have already done several videos about the Mini 2. You will find a link at the end of this one and in the description below. If you're interested in drones, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. The original Mavic Mini could not shoot video at 4K, and that was quite surprising. It had a maximum resolution of only 2.7K at 30 frames per second. With the new Mini 2, 4K video is finally available, and that is certainly a huge option, and a deal maker for many users. Some of you may ask, what is the big deal with 4K, as you probably cannot even tell the difference in quality in the footage you're watching now, depending on your screen. The Mini 2, because of its size below 250 grams, is in most countries under more relaxed regulations, especially in urban environments. For this reason, it can be a useful tool for professional videographers as a second drone to put in the bag in urban situations. But most professional projects these days are put together in 4K timelines, so the lack of 4K capabilities was taking the Mavic Mini out of the equation for these sorts of users. Another reason to shoot in 4K is to future-proof your footage, as in the next few years the format 1080p Full HD will be probably slowly phased out. The Mini 2 is an ideal drone for people who are mostly interested in posting their footage on social media. In most cases, these users work on a 1080p timeline, but by shooting 4K and delivering in 1080p, there is plenty of extra room for reframing and cropping. It is also possible to take full advantage of the new zoom function. Unlike the Air 2 and the Mavic 2 line, the Mini 2 doesn't have a flat color profile meant for extended dynamic range or for heavy post-processing. There is a single 8-bit mode, pre-processed and ready to use out of the box, although a small amount of color grading is often useful to get the most out of it. The quality of the footage with good light shooting away from the sun is absolutely excellent. The amount of detail is stunning. The vegetation and architecture features are extremely sharp. The sensor is the same 1/2.3 inches used in most previous models of the Mavic line, and it is hard to believe how much the video quality has improved with the Mini 2, probably due in part to the new video processor. In the past, for a long time I've used the Mavic 2 Zoom, equipped with the same sensor, and the footage taken with it looks a bit mushy compared to the Mini 2. The 2 Zoom also showed heavy moire, especially in building and geometrical patterns. You can clearly see that the horizontal lines move independently, as if they had a life of their own. I have not seen any moire at all with the Mini 2 so far, and this is extremely useful. I cannot show side-by-side footage of the two drones, as my trusty Mavic 2 Zoom sadly passed away during a mission a few months ago. In this top-down view of a vineyard, we notice once again excellent detail and very good color rendition. Also, at ISO 100, all the footage I have shot so far looks totally noise-free. Excellent performance. The exposure value can be set manually or automatically. I recommend to always use manual values in order to avoid sudden shift of luminosity when the light changes during a video clip. For the same reason, I also suggest to always use manual white balance. You might notice A little bit of choppiness in my footage. This is due to the fact that I haven't got ND filter yet, so I had to shoot at a very fast shutter speed value in order to expose correctly. With previous Mavic models, in overcast conditions, the footage often looked quite mushy. While the Mini 2 delivers again excellent detail. In this case there is plenty of difference in luminosity between the sky and the ground. In other words, it is a high dynamic range situation. Quite a difficult one, and the Mini 2 struggles a bit to expose correctly both the sky and the ground, but the result is still relatively good. Under this condition, a flat profile like the ones in the Mavic Air 2 and the Mavic 2 Pro helps a lot. The Air 2 also has a specific HDR video mode, which works relatively well, while the Mavic 2 Pro has the excellent 10-bit color mode in H.265 and a much big sensor. So, decent performance from the Mini 2 in air conditions, although the bigger brothers in the family are better equipped for this sort of scenarios. An area where drones seriously struggle is shooting in the direction of the sun, basically situations of extreme high dynamic range. This is obviously due to the tiny sensor and even more to the extremely basic build of the lenses. With previous Mavic models, I could not even attempt to shoot any footage facing south. Things have improved a lot with the Mavic 2 Pro and even more with the Air 2. Let's see how the Mini 2 fares, as we will move progressively towards the direction of the sun. Let's start with the sun behind us, the easiest conditions. As we saw before, the footage of the Mini 2 is a thing of beauty. Even without any color grading, the colors are really nice and well saturated. The contrast and detail are stunning. The Mini 2 really shines under easy light conditions, especially in a winter afternoon like in this scene. Let's now move to a position with the sun 90 degrees to the left. There are several clouds around Mount Etna, reflecting the light coming from the sun before sunset. If we avoid burning the highlights, the shadow will be a bit too dark, but with some color grading we can lower the contrast by reducing the highlights and lifting the shadows to our taste for a good final result. Moving closer now, the sun is just outside the left edge of the image. We're getting into extreme HDR, something that I would not even attempt with Mavic models of the previous generation. If we want to preserve the highlight, the shadows will be very dark, almost silhouette. After lifting the shadows, the result is extremely good, considering the environment. The footage is acceptable, even though a fat color profile like the ones of the Air 2 or the 2 Pro would be very useful. If we zoom in at 200%, we notice some loss of detail and a few artifacts in the buildings farther away, due in part to the fact that we are adding a good dose of editing to an image already cooked and baked to start with. But still, the result is in a totally different league compared to Mavic models of a couple of years ago, including the Mavic 2 Zoom. Let's now go for the full Monty, totally against the sun. We are a couple of hours before sunset and there are some clouds, but let me point out that I would not shoot footage against the sun with any prosumer drone, as the results are always disappointing in my opinion. But I know some people love this situation, so let's see what we can do. If we want to use ungraded footage, we have the choice to either expose for the shadows and let the highlights get completely burned, or preserve the highlights and have the rest of the image as a silhouette. It must be said that the Mini 2 renders both situations much better than previous model, avoiding nasty flares, chromatic aberration and lack of detail. Even after heavy post-processing, it is not possible to render decently both the highlight and the shadows. But as I said at the beginning, it is simply not possible to get decent result with a drone shooting with the sun in the frame. Even with the mighty Nikon D850 with excellent lens, the results against the sun are only occasionally good. If we avoid the full sun in the frame, the Mini 2 perform astonishingly well in extreme high dynamic range. Only the Mavic Air 2 and the 2 Pro do slightly better, but they have an array of tricks in their bag, including flat color profiles. Another weak point of Mavic drones equipped with the same sensor of the Mini 2 was performance at low light and higher ISO values. With the Mavic 2 zoom I used to keep the ISO always at its base value, as otherwise the amount of noise would be unacceptable. Both the Mavic 2 Pro and the Air 2 have different sensors, and their performance in terms of higher ISO values was much better. Let's see how the Mini 2 fares. At ISO 100 the image is absolutely perfect. The detail could not be any better in the trees and in the building. No noise whatsoever. Stunning quality. At ISO 200 the quality of the footage is practically identical. Even zooming at 200%, detail and noise level are almost as good as at 100. At ISO 400 the footage is still excellent. At full size we start to lose just a touch of detail on the trees in the foreground, although it remains still excellent. Zooming in we start to see the tiniest hint of noise, while the detail remains very good. At ISO 800 I'm truly astonished by how the footage maintains detail and a minimal noise level. Obviously on a deep zoom a bit of noise shows up, but this clip is still usable even without denoising. I'm shocked. At ISO 1600 we start to see a tiny bit of noise in the full-size image, and zooming in we can clearly see some noise and loss of detail. But after using Nit Video the clip is still very much usable, and this is unreal. It is hard to believe how much the video quality at low light has improved in the last couple of years using the same sensor. DJI must have applied some sort of black magic. I mean, the footage of the Mini at 1600 ISO is much better than the one of the Mavic 2 zoom at 400 ISO. I am speechless. The Mini 2 has a new zoom facility, which can be very handy in some specific situations. But it is not like the optical zoom of the Mavic 2 zoom, where the magnification of the image was due to the lens. In this case, the zoom is digital, just like zooming in post-production with a video editor. When zooming digitally, there is obviously a loss in the final resolution. For professional projects on a 4K timeline, this zoom facility will not be used because of the loss in resolution. The effect is exactly the same as zooming afterhand on a computer, a process that allows for much more flexibility. But for people who mostly post footage on social media at 1080p resolution and don't have the time or the possibility of post-processing their footage, this will be a very useful option. When filming in 4K, it is possible to apply a 2x zoom factor. Basically, at full zoom, the resolution will be very close to 1080p. Zooming can be achieved by dragging the finger on the screen over the zoom icon next to the shutter, but for better results, it is possible to scroll the gimbal wheel on the remote controller while pressing and holding the FN button. As you can see, the zoom-in action is very smooth. In this case, there won't be any loss of resolution when working on a 1080p timeline. At 2.7K, there is a 3x zoom factor, but as you can see, there is a very noticeable loss of quality. At 1080p, a 4x zoom factor is available, but the quality falls totally apart. For best results, I would only use the 2x zoom, filming at 4K, when rendering at 1080p, and avoid all other options. The Mini 2 has a maximum bitrate of 100 Mbps at 4K resolution, against 40 Mbps for the original Mavic Mini. This is a huge increase. A higher bitrate means less compressed files, so we should expect the file of the Mini 2 shot at 4K to perform better in post-processing. It is true that footage shot with the original Mini could only stand a minimal amount of post-processing, especially while adjusting the white balance, as the colors would take unnatural tones. Also, when trying to modify individual colors, artifacts, banding and pixelation of the image were frequent. Let's see how the Mini 2 reacts to heavier post-processing. In this image, I have used Lumetri Color in After Effects to increase contrast. As you can see, the file responds perfectly. Let's try now with the white balance. We can go toward a cooler, more bluish tone, or a warmer one, and the image maintains nice natural colors. Finally, let's go for the stress test, modifying an individual color, which is a real torture for compressed 8-bit files. Let's increase the saturation of the sky. Then we can slightly modify the hue towards purple or towards yellow-green. Then we can modify the luminosity, make it slightly lighter or perhaps a bit darker. This is how the image was before, and this is how the sky is now. As you can see, a big change. But even if we zoom into the image, we cannot see any artifacts at all. This is once again an excellent performance. The files of the Mini 2 are indeed very solid. I believe I will be using the Mavic Mini 2 a lot, especially when shooting in urban situations. I was already impressed with the quality of photography, but now I'm really astonished by the video performance. I will keep posting videos about the Mini 2, so if you're interested in drones, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Bye for now.